Hi, this is your host Swapnil Bhartiya and welcome to another episode of TFiR Newsroom. And today we have with us Elad Koren, Chief Product Officer at Salt Security. Elad, it's great to have you on the show.
It's great to be here.
And there is a lot to talk about today. Of course, the funding, enhancement to the Salt platform. Let's start with the funding. Tell us about it.
Today, Salt and CrowdStrike announced the funding from the CrowdStrike Falcon Fund. This is an exciting partnership between the CrowdStrike and Salt, so we're super excited about it. It's another vote of confidence that Salt is a leader in API security, and definitely a great sign for everyone involved.
What does this funding really mean for Salt?
It means a few things. The first thing that it means is that it symbols the trust that CrowdStrike has in this category, in the API security category as a whole, and the fact that it's here to stay. It's not just another thing that started 2-3 years ago, and Salt has been preaching about for many years before. It's actually something that organizations should be aware or have that in their in top of mind when they're thinking about the security budget. In addition, it also says a lot about the potential partnership for the CrowdStrike customers and the market as a whole, because at the end of the day, there is a better together story for CrowdStrike and Salt.
Now let's talk about the platform. Talk a bit about what improvement enhancements are there.
So about a month and a half ago, Salt has released a bunch of features and announced in a dedicated PR that we essentially wanted to let everyone know that right now, as part of our broad platform, we've been dealing with a lot on the right side. The real-time attacks that really require some deep understanding of the actual API and the context of everything we see. Around a month and a half ago, we announced the left side, the contextual API security testing. This is actually a complementary thing that we've added to our platform. And at the end of the day, our customers really expressed their interest in having such a capability that would actually provide everything that we've done so far on the right, which is a consensus that we are the leading on that front, and we take it to the left. It's not yet another testing platform, which we've seen around. It's actually taking the full understanding into context and applying a testing methodology and testing strategy that can really leverage the understanding of the API. What types of different object IDs we have there? What is a potential BOLA, a broken object level authorization? And we take the entire context and we bring it into the left side to really simulate actual attacks. And that is the really big announcement that we've made. Now it's available to all customers and prospects. I don't know if you have any specific questions on that, but there are two other very, very exciting pieces of news there. But we can move to that or cover a bit about the contextual testing before doing so.
So we are essentially talking about API security, but I also want to talk about, because API security is, part of bigger security, challenges that are there. Just a few days ago, we heard about the Uber security breach, which was a massive breach. What is shocking is that, first of all, we are talking about a company of Uber scale, and they have a lot of sensitive data. I'm not talking just about credit card information, where I live, where I've been to, all the places I go to, who else may have been there, who else has been to my house. So in today's world, we assume that companies may have improved their security posture, and yes, they have. But if you just look at the Uber case, it was once again social engineering kind of thing was done. We should not. I mean, we can expect that if there is a rogue state which is going after, then they have all the resources to kind of penetrate your defenses. But here we are talking about supposedly 18-year-old guy who released everything on Slack channel as well. So first of all, how does that make you feel about security? Or we preach a lot about security, but when we look at practices, it's not there.
Yeah, I think you're onto something that is actually, I think, in many places, especially in the security industry, we've seen in POVs and prospects and customers and in engagements, you go in and you see that there are the practices that people are talking about, and in general the industry is thinking highly of. But in practice, we see many organizations that are missing on these basic stuff. And I have to admit, right, at the end of the day, you have to prioritize, and you have to balance the things that you do versus what you need to do. I think often rather than not, many organizations compromise security because they really want to move fast. And we're seeing that across the board. You want to move fast, you develop something. This is why, if and I don't want to talk specifically about Uber, because you can talk about many of the breaches that you've seen in the past year or two. If you only monitored production and not just API security, security in general, right? Um, if you really take a look at what happens there, if you have great tools to identify those mishaps, then you're not really dependent on those testing or building the right solutions in place. Because at the end of the day, the weakest link is the person behind the keyboard, right? It's always the weakest link, because we're all human. And that is where you need the right controls in place, right? This is the way I'm looking at stuff.
From cultural perspective, what do you think should be done to kind of, as you said earlier, that security sometimes is not on the front burner, on the main burner, it goes to the back burner. What should be done so that these companies do not compromise with the security? At the same time, we should also kind of lower the barrier for security as well, so that it doesn't become a hurdle. It should not interfere with developers, workflows. Also, one cultural shift is happening. Shift left, everything is moving into developer's pipeline. So what does the developer do? Does he or she improve the functionality of feature, or should protect the application? So talk about that.
I think you're spot on. So, um, it, and the legislator or different regulations around the world try to deal with this, right? And they are trying, between GDPR and CCPA and digital assets, and many legislations have been applied to try and address this. But at the end of the day, they all end up at the same place, right? It's still another box to tick. You still need to, and I've been there. I've been head of risk security and compliance at a fintech company, and I know how hard I had to fight the business to say, yeah, this is a great solution. We really need to do that, but let's just protect it properly, right? So we know that this is not compromising our customers or our end users, and it's always that fine balance. I think if if we get to a point where it's not just a fine, right? It's not just something that um, a state or like the European Union puts up and says, yeah, now you need to pay because there was this mishap and a breach. I think if we get to a point where companies will have to actually compensate users when this happens, they'll rethink things, right? Up until now, it was, yeah, you can sue, you can do, but if we make it their responsibility to take care of their end users, like in a case you mentioned, if they had to go and compensate every person, not just notify them, but compensate them on every piece of information that may have created issues for these people, then it may impact their ability to say, okay, so let's move a bit slower, but let's be very careful with what we do. Let's not just look the other side and say, yeah, well, we estimated the risk. It's a low risk. we take that risk, right? We accept this risk. No, if you're accepting a risk, you need to communicate that risk accepted to your end users. I think that is a fair point. And that would shift the balance slightly more towards being more careful versus being more, business and velocity oriented.
Sometimes all these things are like less than a slap in the wrist. So companies are like, you know what, we can afford to keep paying those. I don't even care. Sometimes the fines are so little, it doesn't even bother. Oh, we can pay the fine for next 10 years. So the punishment should be so severe that it puts the company at the risk of.
You're completely right, because at the end of the day, it becomes a risk versus cost, right? Because if I can get away with paying some fine and it still makes sense from a business perspective, then it creates that type of thinking or a line of thinking that you don't want to encourage. You want to encourage a line of thinking of, personal data or users information is something that you cannot, and I'm not the first one to say that, probably not the last, but I think it requires a complete new way of thinking, right? A complete new way of thinking of what's fair and where we are from a digital perspective. And it's not just a trade-off between the risk and cost. It's way more than that, because it's people lives out there.
I talk to Sol Security, Michelle, on almost a regular basis. So we do touch upon a lot of surveys that you folks do, report that you folks do, and there's always a worrisome trend, where companies continue to experience attacks, compromises that happen there. First of all, what would you advise them, from at least API's perspective, that they can do something to at least improve the security posture? Because security is not a product, it's a process, it's an ongoing cat and mouse game. So it's not like you can never rest assured that, hey, you know what, I have locked the doors, I don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, we're not there anymore. I don't think we ever was, right? We had the false perception that we were, but we are not there, even with the perception. What Salt tries to do, and what we try to do on a regular basis, and provide that value to our customers, is the ability to continue and improve. And our claim to fame is when you take a look at what's out there, those risks that we identify, and those vulnerabilities that our customers may have, even before there is an attacker trying to take advantage of it, we in Salt try to continue and add more and more things that we can provide to our customers to say, hey, you know what? You didn't know. This is fine. API, you were moving really fast, but this you should probably fix it, because I don't know, this data was exposed when there's no authentication, right? We had multiple breaches out there that happened because of that reason specifically. And it's not just that. I cannot tell you the numerous times I was hopping on a call with a prospect or a customer saying, well, you see, this authentication method for API, I understand it's a legacy API, but it's not the strongest. You don't want to use a header with the user and password, right? It's bad practice. Don't do that. And they will be smiling and looking at me and saying, "We know, yeah," like a kid that the teacher was saying to, "Well, you shouldn't have done that." But at the end of the day, they need someone to tell that to them. And today it's that, and tomorrow it's something else, and more things that we can introduce. But also the ability to say, I'm spotting something that shouldn't happen in your environment, right? We baseline hundreds of parameters in every customer environment, and just bringing that to their attention, saying, well, something is weird here. Take a look. Um, Even if it's not an attack, I cannot tell you the number of times, so many times, where we said, well, take a look at that. And they were like, oh, we made a mistake. There was a misconfiguration here, or an issue there. So we're not just about protecting that attack that may or may not come. It's also about, how to build APIs better. And this is where we are. We take really big pride in helping promote the better, the greater good, right? And how to build software better. as a whole.
When we look at API related risk, once again it could be misconfiguration. Of course, it could be, once again, who has access to what. And then third point is some kind of bugs and vulnerability in the code. So there is a technology part, and then there is a kind of social or cultural part. So once again, which one do you think is more serious? Because technology we can fix, you can release a patch, but you cannot release a people patch. So talk about that also. And then once again, from cultural perspective, what advice do you have for organizations?
What I always say is that API is not like a database. You do not just, say, here's my schema, and now this is how the database looks like. It's a bunch of lines of codes that form an API. At the end of the day, people are people. They're human. They'll build stuff. They'll document some of the stuff. But if organizations really want to understand what's out there, they need a tool to help them understand what's actually out there. And the only way to do that is not just by scanning a code or trying to test. The testing is the known knowns, or maybe even the known unknowns. But the only way to really see what people did or how it works is monitor production, and that is where you identify the unknown unknowns, right? And I always say that, and then I finish with a story of, I was in touch with a software company, actually a security company, that I helped them with some stuff, and they brought me in to consult. And then I told them, hey, do you know that you have this specific? And I swear it's a security company. You have this API open in your GCP environment, and it's actually an API that allows access to some of the data that you have there. And when they investigated, they figure out it's a developer that opened this API, and it was part of a partnership that they had with an external organization, and they had no idea it's open. And they had no way of knowing because that developer was no longer in the company. And until they scanned the entire way of, how they spun it up and how it was out there and just open. Luckily, nobody tried to access that, but I was able to know that it's there because I scanned their open URLs, and I was scanning their environment, and it popped up. And nobody thought of doing that because they said, well, we shouldn't have anything open. And that is the point. It's always, well, you don't think about what you don't know or at all, right? The unknown unknowns. And that is obtained by looking at the production traffic. And that is how you eliminate the human part of things. Because if at the end of the day, there's a human out there that puts something out, it doesn't matter how much you enforce testing through a process, how much you enforce the monitoring of the documentation, the best practices, you're monitoring what's out there, what's actually being used. That is the only way to ensure that you know what happens, right? And I think if I had to provide only one advice, and it's not just API security, I go way back with RSA security at the days of transaction monitoring in online banking and Trojans and fraud related things. At the end of the day, if you're not monitoring the things that are actually happening and you're just basing your assumptions on how you build stuff or how you created them or what should happen, you're probably missing something. The question is what, right?
Right. Since you talk about this, I also want to talk about something which is, once again, as I said, it just may go beyond APIs also. As you're talking about, an employee did something and the employee moved out. Sometimes it also happens that just like Christmas decoration, like we go to the attic or get the stuff out, decorate it, but you have to put it back as well. So same thing, you may have enabled a lot of things, disabled a lot of things, you may have installed something, but you left it there and the thing is still sitting there without you even knowing that, oh, we enabled that for that particular client. So it's like spring cleaning or whatever you can call it. Do you have any term for that, or how do you look at that problem? Where a lot of things are running which were not meant to be running now, at least.
Yeah, so we consider that either shadow APIs or shadow endpoints or zombie endpoints that were there and somebody used that. So that term is widely used. And yeah, you're right. We're not seeing that just with APIs. You're seeing that across the board. You're seeing that in people leave assets on servers and they're just there. And specifically with us for APIs, yeah, we try to help our customers. We provide the ability to look at drift analysis and documentation versus what's actually out there and what's used. We helped some organizations even identify zombie endpoints that should have been completely deprecated, but they're still out there, and somebody can come and try an approach and obtain data. And well, guess what? They're the least protected endpoints because they should have been deprecated. They're not there. They're not enjoying the most advanced security in large percentage of the cases. So yeah, we are familiar with that, and this is a really big thing as well. Thanks for asking.
Elad, thank you so much for taking time out today and not only talk about, of course, the funding, enhancement to the platform, but also how companies can actually improve their security posture, not just related to API, but in general. So thanks for sharing all those insights. And I love to talk to you folks. So I'd love to have you back on the show. Thank you.
Thanks, Swapnil. It was a real honor, and it was great talking to you. I enjoyed it very much.